Delphine LaLaurie was a 19th century socialite who lived in New Orleans. She owned many slaves, but was known for acting very politely towards them in public. But in 1834, her true evil side was exposed when her house caught on fire. The fire was set by her cook, who was chained to the stove and attempted to burn herself to death. It prompted a group of men to investigate LaLaurie's attic, where they discovered a scene of absolute horror. The room was full of bound slaves who had been tortured so badly that most of the men vomited. Amongst other atrocities, some of the victims were missing their eyes and had their mouths sewn shut. Madame LaLaurie apparently fled the country and lived out the rest of her days in Paris. In 2007, actor Nicolas Cage purchased her former home for $3.5 million. In 1972, Neil Armstrong visited the town of Langholm, Scotland. When he got there, he was read a 400-year-old law declaring that any Armstrong found in the town should be hanged. This is a high-resolution image of stitches in the eye after a corneal transplant. Thanks to the National Association for the Preservation of Skin Art, you can leave your tattoos behind after you die. After the funeral home has removed your tattooed skin, the organization will preserve it in a frame and send it to your loved ones. This is a photo of Benjamin, the last known Tasmanian tiger, at the Hobart Zoo in 1936. The species officially went extinct when Benjamin was locked outside of his sleeping quarters on a cold Tasmanian night and froze to death. This is a photo of two 4-year-old boys playing in a sandbox full of asbestos in the town of Wittenoom, Australia in 1954. This was during a time when very little was known about the devastating effects of asbestos on humans. Both boys eventually died from mesothelioma before the age of 40. This is how the population of American buffalo dropped from 30 million to 300 in just 50 years. Those are all buffalo skulls. During the French Revolution, people on death row often fought to be the first one executed by the guillotine. This was because the blade would dull after multiple uses and eventually wouldn't cut the head clean off on the first attempt. Dr. Seuss cheated on his wife while she had cancer. After finding out about the affair, she killed herself and Dr. Seuss married his mistress. This former jailer from Georgia was arrested on rape charges. Police say the scratch marks in his mugshot are from the victim fighting back. This is a photo of a 9-year-old boy from Amsterdam during the winter hunger Dutch famine that ended in 1945. Many children carried spoons with them wherever they went just in case they'd be offered a meal. This is a medical journal showing the before and after of a mental patient who received a lobotomy. The caption reads, "Simple schizophrenia patients make nice household pets after operation." In 1980, when a group of loggers were cutting off the top of a chestnut oak tree, they noticed the mummified remains of a hunting dog. Experts believe that it chased its prey up the tree in the 1960s, only to get stuck and eventually die. He was posthumously named Stucky. After Wildlife Wonderland in Melbourne, Australia went abandoned in 2012, a dead great white shark was left to decompose in a tank for more than 5 years. This is a leaked screenshot from CNN's supposed doomsday tape. The footage is meant to be broadcasted by the last surviving employee in case all of humanity is about to die. It features a marching band playing the song "Nearer My God to Thee," the same song that onboard musicians played as the Titanic sank. Paul Carrison's entire skin gradually turned blue after he attempted to use silver as a home remedy. He was trying to treat his dermatitis, a skin condition. It is rather common to break someone's ribs while performing CPR on them. A lot of people say it sounds and feels just like bubble wrap. In 1973, a man purchased an old hearse and told all his friends that he needed it to bring all the people he killed to his private cemetery. While all of his friends thought he was kidding, it was serial killer Donald Gaskins telling the truth. In 2013, a group of burglars stole a bunch of computers from an office building. But they soon returned the items with this note because they realized they had stolen from a non-profit group that helps victims of sexual abuse. These are shoes made to look like cow hooves that were worn by moonshiners to hide their tracks during Prohibition. Serial killer Robert Hansen was responsible for the murders of at least 17 women throughout the 70s and 80s. He would first abduct his victims and fly them to his isolated cabin in the Alaskan mountains, which was only accessible by boat or plane. He would then release them and hunt them down like wild animals, using a knife or hunting rifle. In 1976, 7 armed men broke into Bob Marley's home and attempted to assassinate him. Bob was shot in the chest and the arm but survived. His wife Rita was shot in the head but also survived thanks to her thick dreadlocks slowing down the bullet. Marley's manager claimed that the CIA was behind the assassination attempt. In 1894, a priest in Germany saved a little boy from drowning. That little boy was Adolf Hitler. In many of his later portraits, Napoleon Bonaparte can be seen with his hand over his stomach. This is because he suffered from severe abdominal pain due to what we can identify today as stomach cancer. It is believed that he died from the cancer at the age of 51. Dennis Vashurin looks like a young teenage boy, but he's actually 32 years old. Due to a genetic malfunction, Dennis stopped aging sometime in his teens, but otherwise he is healthy. In ancient Rome, men found guilty of rape sometimes had their testicles crushed between 2 stones. In Devon, England, there's a shadow of a sign that closely resembles a person being hanged. Coincidentally, it can be seen near a spot called Dead Man's Cross, where criminals were hanged from a gallows in the 13th century. Richard Klinkhammer's wife mysteriously disappeared in 1991. The next year, he wrote a book on 7 ways to kill your spouse. A few years later, the new owners of his former home found his wife's skeletal remains. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison but was released 5 years early for good behavior. In 2009, spelunker John Jones was caving with some friends and family in the Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. About an hour into the expedition, John decided to find the route known as the Birth Canal, a narrow passage that spelunkers must crawl through carefully if they dare. After finding what he thought was the birth canal, he crawled in head first and started inching his way forward. But John would soon realize that this wasn't the birth canal, since it was way tighter than anything safe to crawl through. By this point, John didn't even have enough room to wiggle out the way he came, so his only option was to push forward. Over the next 27 hours, hundreds of rescuers failed to pull John out of the crevice. At some point, John died from cardiac arrest and his body was never retrieved. The Nutty Putty Cave has since been sealed off. Per Olin, better known by his stage name Dead, was the lead singer for the Norwegian black metal band Mayhem. At the age of 10, he was attacked by some bullies who left him so badly injured that he was declared clinically dead for a few minutes. After this incident, he began an unhealthy obsession for everything related to death. He collected dead birds, performed using corpse paint, and would even routinely cut himself while on stage. Dead was believed to have suffered from Cotard syndrome, a mental disorder characterized by the belief that you are truly dead and don't exist in reality. In 1991, he committed suicide by slitting his wrists and throat before shooting himself in the forehead with a shotgun. He left a suicide note that was very brief because he didn't believe that he was alive in the first place. Don Rickles passed away before he was able to record any lines for Toy Story 4. But instead of replacing him, Disney reviewed 25 years of material from the first 3 films, video games, and other media. They were able to assemble enough dialogue to cover the entire film. This seal pup was abandoned by her colony because she's ginger. In 1945, a U.S. Air Force bomber accidentally crashed into the Empire State Building due to heavy fog. The accident caused the deaths of 14 people and more than $1 million in damages. Plane parts also severed the cables of an elevator and the woman inside fell for 70 stories. She miraculously lived and still holds the world record for the longest survived elevator fall. Pablo Escobar's nephew still lives in one of the drug lord's apartments in Medellin. He recently found $18 million in cash hidden away in a plastic bag behind a wall. He told Colombian media that a vision told him where to look for the cash. A Russian man who tried to rob a hair salon ended up as the victim when the female shop owner overpowered him. She tied him up naked and used him as a sex slave for several days. Peruvian Mayor Jaime Rolando Urbina Torres broke the nationwide lockdown to go drinking with friends. When authorities attempted to apprehend him, the drunken mayor jumped into an empty coffin that was lying near him and pretended to be dead. Lil Wayne accidentally shot himself in the chest when he was 12 years old. A policeman by the name of Uncle Bob came to his rescue after multiple officers stepped over him. Until as recently as 1985, doctors believed that babies couldn't feel pain and performed surgeries on them without anesthesia. Due to their unique spinal structure, elephants are not meant to carry heavy loads on their backs. They often suffer severe spinal injuries as a result of carrying tourists around for several hours each day. Author Lewis Carroll wanted to marry an 11-year-old girl named Alice when he was 31. It is widely accepted that Alice in Wonderland was inspired by his obsession for little Alice Liddell. This is what the skull of a bone cancer patient looks like. Maggie the Wonder Dog was found pregnant and blinded with 17 gunshot wounds on the streets of Lebanon. Now she's a certified therapy dog and has a large following on Instagram. An Italian company has designed organic burial pods that are completely biodegradable. It will convert the dead into nutrients for trees to grow on. So instead of a graveyard, this will create a sacred forest of new life. This is a 1993 photo of a vulture waiting for a starving African girl to die so that it can eat her. Photographer Kevin Carter committed suicide just 4 months after winning a Pulitzer Prize for the photo. Penguins have been known to push other penguins into the water to make sure that the area is free from predators. The song Ring Around the Rosie is believed to originate from the Great Plague of London in 1665. The Rosie refers to the rash that covered people who contracted the disease, the smell of which they tried to cover up with a pocket full of posies. The ashes were the cremated remains of the dead, and well, they all did fall down. The epidemic wiped out nearly a quarter of London's population within a span of 18 months. This is a photo of a Chicago mother hiding her face in shame after putting her children up for sale in 1948. The two that are circled were sold to an abusive family for $2 apiece so that their mother could afford to pay rent. Their new father would often chain them up in a barn and force them to work long hours on his farm. He even frequently called them slaves even though they didn't know what it meant at the time. In 1867, Carolyn Walter died from tuberculosis when she was just 17 years old. So her devastated sister Selma paid a sculptor to carve a beautiful headstone to remember her by. And every morning after Carolyn's funeral, a fresh flower was found tucked under the arm of her statue. This tradition still continues today, more than 150 years after her death, and no one knows who leaves them. Denver Airport's Blue Mustang sculpture is nicknamed Blucifer because of its glowing red eyes. Just before it was unveiled in 2006, Blue Mustang's artist died after a 9,000-pound piece of the sculpture fell on him, adding credence to the theories that Blucifer is haunted or cursed. In 1963, 2 criminals in Mexico convinced local villagers that they were prophets and demanded worship and tribute. Prostitute Magdalena Solis was paid to imitate an Incan goddess as part of the scam. Suffering from religious delusion, she started to genuinely believe that she was a goddess. She soon took over the cult and started sacrificing her followers and drinking their blood. In 2007, the Coble family lost their 2 girls and 1 boy in a horrific car accident. A year later, the mother gave birth to triplets, 2 girls and 1 boy. The reason The Beauty and the Beast was written was to help young girls accept arranged marriages. This woman single-handedly buried and gave funerals to more than 40 gay men at the height of the AIDS epidemic. Many victims were never claimed by their families due to stigmas surrounding the disease. Lieutenant Colonel A.J. Drexel Biddle was a master in hand-to-hand combat. He used to order his troops to surround him with bayonets before single-handedly disarming each of them without any of his own weapons. This photo of one such demonstration was taken in 1943. Tsar Bomba was the largest bomb ever set off by far. It produced a mushroom cloud 168 times taller than the Empire State Building. Its power output was 1.4% of the sun's, and it sent shockwaves that traveled around the Earth 3 times. After a battle in Vietnam, Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez had 37 puncture wounds, exposed intestines, and a broken jaw. He was pronounced dead until he spit in the face of a doctor who was zipping him up in a body bag. Infamous streaker Mark Roberts was sponsored by GoldenPalace.com to streak during Super Bowl 38. He was paid $1 million, given front row tickets, and was provided with one of the best defense attorneys in the U.S. He was able to reduce his charges down to a misdemeanor and a $1,000 fine. Brian Banks spent 6 years in prison before his alleged rape victim admitted that it never happened. This was the moment when he was exonerated. In 2006, 51-year-old Susan Walters was attacked by a hitman that her husband had hired to kill her. After finding out who sent him, she ended up killing him with her bare hands. In August of 1864, President Lincoln lost his hat when his horse was startled by a loud noise. The hat was recovered later with a bullet hole through the crown. The loud noise was apparently an assassination attempt by an unknown sniper. Ella Harper was born with an extremely rare genetic condition that curved her knees in the opposite direction. She was popular in sideshows and was known as Camel Girl because she preferred to walk on all fours. In 2009, Moscow native Julia Popova was stabbed in the neck by a mugger, but she was in so much shock that she walked home without even realizing that the knife was embedded in her, just millimeters from her spinal cord. She spent over an hour with the blade in her back before she went to the hospital. This elderly woman from Brooklyn is a hoarder who also happens to be legally blind. At some point in the 1990s, her son who lived in the house disappeared. In 2016, his fully clothed skeleton was found in a room filled with garbage. She had been living with his corpse for 20 years. These are just some of the reasons why people used to be committed to mental asylums. In 2006, 5-year-old Robert Turner called 911 after his mother collapsed in her bedroom. But the operator hung up after asking him to put an adult on the phone and assuming it was a prank. 3 hours later, he called 911 again and another operator told him to stop prank calling. This time, police were sent to the home where they found that the mother of 10 had died from a heart attack. Bullets fired into the air usually fall back down at terminal velocity. As a result, there have been thousands of deaths due to celebratory gunfire. For example, in 2003, more than 20 people were killed by celebratory gunfire in Iraq following the deaths of Saddam Hussein's 2 sons. Chemical castration is mandatory in Florida and California for pedophiles convicted of their second offense. During a 2019 expedition to the deepest point in the ocean, explorers found a plastic bag and candy wrappers, indicating that plastic pollution hasn't spared even the most remote corners of the ocean. In 1996, 14-year-old Barry Lukaitis opened fire on his high school algebra class in Washington State. He killed 2 fellow students and the teacher. As his classmates were panicking, he was quoted saying, "This sure beats the hell out of algebra, doesn't it?" He is currently serving out a 189-year prison sentence for the murders. The Dutch police once caught some cannabis growers because their house was the only one on the street without snow on the roof. Stephen Russell escaped prison by using laxatives to fake the symptoms of AIDS. He then called the prison posing as a doctor and asked for any inmates who were interested in experimental AIDS treatment. He volunteered, and once he was out of Texas, he sent a fake death certificate to the prison stating that he had died. Ever since she was a little girl, Jewel Shuping wanted to be blind. So in 2006, she poured drain cleaner into her eyes and blinded herself. She says that she is happier than ever after fulfilling her lifelong wish. Less than 24 hours after you die, your pet cat will start eating your face. Charlie No-Face was an urban legend in Pennsylvania who used to walk along the side of highways at night. In reality, he was a man named Raymond Robinson who was left badly disfigured after a childhood electrocution accident. He only went out at night so his face wouldn't scare people, and he was said to be a friendly and well-liked man. President FDR was having a portrait painted of himself by a watercolor artist on April 12, 1945. But he had been complaining about a headache and suddenly collapsed before the painting was finished. The president had suffered a stroke and died later that day. The unfinished portrait captures his final waking moments. Children that have been exposed to family violence show the same patterns of brain activity as soldiers who have been in combat. In the year 2000, a man survived a jump off the Golden Gate Bridge but broke his back on impact. He was saved from drowning by a sea lion who kept him afloat until rescuers could reach him. Ever since the incident, the man has said that as soon as he jumped, he realized he didn't want to die. A woman from Edinburgh, Scotland thought that her frequent nosebleeds were caused by a motorcycle accident. But one day she felt something poking out of her nose while she was taking a shower, and she found the culprit. A 3-inch long leech had been living in her nostril for more than a month. Pool drains are literally powerful enough to suck your organs right out of your body. And it's one of the grisliest ways in which people have died. Starting in the 16th century, the Catholic Church used to castrate young Italian boys to preserve their high-pitched singing voices. Alessandro Moreschi, aka the Last Castrato, sang until his death in 1921. Joe DiMaggio was so devastated when Marilyn Monroe died that he brought flowers to her grave 3 times a week for more than 20 years. He never remarried, and his last words were, "I'll finally get to see Marilyn." Tokyo University's Medical Pathology Museum has a collection of 105 full-body tattoo skins. In the year 2000, a group of therapists were attempting to treat 10-year-old Candace Newmaker's attachment disorder. They were trying a controversial method known as rebirthing. Candace was first wrapped in flannels to represent a womb. She was then sat on by 4 grown adults and was told to free herself. Within 20 minutes, she started screaming and vomiting, but they continued the treatment. Nearly an hour later, she was dead.